Oh God, here we are. We've got another podcast. Just a heads up, okay? So those of you who've been listening to the podcast, watching them, have a bit of a cough. My voice is a bit so if I go on mute and go off screen is because I'm having a coughing fit. But Charlotte and I still wanted to do this podcast. Well, actually, Charlotte was a bit like, should we try another time? And I'm like, nah, let's just do it. They'll cope. We're just being real, and this is real. So, Charlotte, you asked me about doing a podcast about the movie Ghost. So that's kind of what we're talking about, and who knows where we'll go with it. But I might throw it to you to kind of tell us what about that movie? Why are we going to have this conversation? And then we'll just cut loose.
Well, for everyone listening, we're talking about the 1990s movie Ghost. So it's like a classic. So many of our listeners probably weren't even born when that movie came out. It starred Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. And Channing Tatum is actually in the midst of doing a remake of this movie. And I think the younger generation will get to watch it again. But what happened was, and spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, so if you want to see it, stop watching or listening, watch the movie and come back to us, because we're going to talk about some of the things that happened in the movie. And so the character played by Patrick Swayze passes away. And he was madly in love with his wife, Demi Moore, and Demi's character equally in love with Patrick Swayze's character. And Patrick's character is kind of stuck in this place of in limbo. He doesn't realize at the start that he has passed away and he can't come back into his body and be human or alive again. But he starts to converse with a medium who's played by Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi plays a character called Oda Mae Brown, and in Whoopi fashion, it was a very funny character. But Patrick Swayze's character starts to talk to Whoopi. And that's where I wanted to start this conversation with you, Robyn. So I've kind of given a little background on what we're going to talk about. But Oda Mae Brown was that character in the movie that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and like when you look at it, right? But whether we think about that movie or any kind of medium, because we pay mediums to connect with people who have passed on. And some mediums earn lots and lots and lots of money, and some don't. And in that movie, she wasn't earning a lot. And I think at the start, she was a little bit of a scammer. And then, Patrick Swayze starts dumping into her and saying stuff, and she's like, what's happening? And she kind of ends up chatting with Demi Moore, but from Patrick Swayze, I know, hang with us. But it's like the world loved that movie. The
Yeah.
world connecting with a loved one who'd passed on. And, it was only the person who'd passed on that knew these things. And how could they know? Not once did anyone look at that movie and go, oh, Whoopi Goldberg had a mental health issue. Oh my God, she was hearing things, seeing things that weren't there. Um, and like one of my challenges to us is, why is it that some people are seen to have a serious mental illness, and it's like, oh, we have to stop those voices, stop seeing those things. Whereas other people are like revered, and particularly in different cultural settings, revered as like medicine people or people that we go to connect to people who have passed on. And I've had this conversation with some friends of mine, right, who talk about what they experience when they're coming or withdrawing from drugs. And my friends who have been given a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and I've got my own diagnosis of bipolar, and we've had this discussion, and each of us have seen the same things. I call them black blobbies, these black shapes floating and sometimes coming at me. My other friends have seen the same thing when they're like withdrawing from drugs and alcohol, and my friends diagnosed with schizophrenia. And we had this conversation about, is it like a brain disorder, or is it that we're just in a different space and connected to different universes at that time, or more open? And one of the peer workers that I get to see a lot talked about they had an elder say to them, "Oh, you're just more open spiritually now, and we have to support you to be able to manage that openness so it doesn't impact you in a negative way." And so I love that you went, let's talk about Ghost, because that movie's like, yeah, it's cool, it's a medium, you know.
But
Um,
Robyn, you got to refer back to the movie with the black Bobby. Black.
oh, I forgot about the black blobbies were in that movie.
Yeah.
They came to get him.
Not Patrick Swayze's character, but the
Yes,
evil characters in the movie.
yes. I
Yeah.
I can oh, I just got goosebumps. I never even remember that goosebumps are going off right now. And isn't that intriguing that I didn't even think about that. So what about you, Charlotte? What are your kind of, because obviously I'm speaking from my own experience of seeing the black blobbies and feeling them, and I don't hear stuff, but I do see stuff. Like I see colors. It's like those cartoons, when you were little, if you're my age, where the colors were coming out of the screen. I get that, the black blobbies. And many of my friends describe similar things, even ones without the same diagnosis. So how do we have a conversation around that? I'm not either way. I'm just, let's have a conversation.
Well, and I think for me, and I hate to say it's like it's all in the marketing. I mean, that movie was beautifully marketed as this romantic thriller.
Mm.
And, are we giving labels to people who are similar to Oda Mae's character, as anything but, a psychic or I don't know. It upsets me because often the people who are a little bit different to say the norm are labeled odd and needs to be fixed, and this isn't, socially acceptable. And yet we fall in love with her character in that movie. And I think for me, if I don't know, like, how do I know? I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting because thinking about that movie, she thought she was going crazy.
I know
Like
at one
she
point,
thought at one point, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind, because she really had been kind of scamming people. And then all of a sudden it was real. And I just think, can we not be open to all sorts of kind of concepts around this? Because there is research saying that, like, schizophrenia and hearing voices and seeing things is a result of trauma. There's research that talks about it as a brain disorder. Like, I don't know if we're ever going to have a definitive answer. And you and I were just doing a live summit recap for Exploration Mastery, our like membership site where we do professional development for peer workers, about that it's the individual story. And so if someone feels that it's a connection to a different universe, why isn't that okay? Look, I'm going to throw the cat among the pigeons, and I want to be super clear. I am not having a go at anyone's religion, but I have said in like keynotes and things that I've done in general, Charlotte knows what's coming. She started laughing. Is I say to people, who's talked to God, right? And, people put up their hand and I say, okay, who's like, where has God physically been that people can see and touch and hear? And then people go, well, no. And I go, why is that okay? But it's not okay for someone who has been given a diagnosis to talk to God or whoever. And I'm like, who makes these determinations, and why do we have to make them? Can we not support people to live a great life, whatever that looks like, because it's theirs? And if it's not bugging them and we don't say, oh, that's a bad thing, like, can we not like allow people to have different points of view?
And I was smiling because at that moment, I remember in the movie, Oda Mae Brown is chasing after Demi Moore's character, whose name was Molly, trying to get Molly to listen. And it's when Patrick Swayze's character, Sam, had taken over Whoopi's body. And you think about if Demi had just called 911 and had Oda Mae taken away, we wouldn't have had the most beautiful moment in that movie of love and intimacy. Do you remember that? Do you remember that scene? And it took some convincing for Demi's character Molly to stop and listen to what Oda Mae or Sam inside of Oda Mae's had to say. And the reason I share that is because sometimes are we closing our ears to hearing what the person we're closest to is saying because we're seeing their diagnosis first? And are we doing a disservice to that person?
Yeah. One of my colleagues years ago in New Zealand said it's only described as a mental illness because it's bugging someone else. And I spend my life trying to not bug other people so they let me be me. And I thought, how sad. And bugging other people, in his perspective, was where people didn't believe what he was saying about what was occurring for him. And it's that space of, do we actually be with people? And yeah, I get sometimes, people with mental health issues, diagnosed mental health stuff, do stuff that is not great. But on the whole, we are the ones that are victims of crimes, not perpetrators, statistically in research. But if I'm not hurting anyone else and I'm having a conversation and choosing freely for me, why can't I? Nobody else comes up to you, Charlotte, as the family member and says, I don't agree with what you're doing with your money or the food you eat or your travel or how you live. But as soon as someone has this label, it's like we have to look at all of your life because you just can't do it. And like I keep saying to people, you get to choose. Let's have a conversation. And, those places are beautiful places to be. But why can't I choose for me if I'm not hurting someone else? You're not saying anything, Charlotte. Are you just like mic drop?
Yeah, I just think that's it.
So watch the old Ghost, watch the remake, and sit and think, why do some people get to decide for the rest of us what it means, how our lives are? And actually, I want to do a podcast about and talk more about when we lose our human rights and our ability to choose, and what that does to people's psyche. And, have the discussion both ways on that, because there are some people like, I should lose my rights in this moment. Other people are like, hell no. So, I want to continue this conversation, but thank you for putting this movie out there, because it is an absolute prime example of, this is okay, but this isn't. And I want to keep having the conversation about who decides and why do they get to decide. So thank you, everyone. Charlotte, last words from you.
Well, just they haven't put the new version out. It's in the works. So watch the classic, the 1990s, and drop some comments. We'd love to hear what you thought of this podcast and what you thought of the movie if you've never seen it.
And don't forget to like us and follow us, because we're cool. All right, catch you later, everyone.